Capitalism is the only moral system because it is based on individual rights, freedom, and voluntary exchange. Welcome to Keith Knight, Don't Tread on Anyone, and the Libertarian Institute. Today, I'm joined by Isabel Riley. Miss Riley, where is the best place to find your archive of research and activist contributions?
You can find me on Twitter, just at Isabella Riley US, and on everything else, it's at Isabella Riley USA because it's too long to be on Twitter. So that's Instagram. I don't know if you're on TikTok. If you're on TikTok, at Isabella Riley USA. But Twitter's probably the best place to find me, ranting about this kind of stuff. So.
Awesome. Yes, all of those links will be in the description below. So you and I went through the collection of Ludwig von Mises quotes that Mark Thornton at the Mises Institute went through. We each got 5 of them. Give me your first quote that you thought was profound.
Okay. So the first one I will talk about is, it says, "The main characteristic of collectivism is that it does not take notice of the individual's will and moral self-determination," which I think just makes so much sense because one of the biggest problems I see today is it's not really a left versus right sort of thing. It's more of a collectivist versus the individualist sort of thing. And the collectivist ideology tells people that whatever you identify as, you could say one thing about this whole collective group of people, but that's obviously not true. Every individual is a unique person, and yeah, I just think that's so important because we all have our own individual wants and needs, and you have to respect others as individuals and don't initiate force upon them. So yeah, do you have anything to say about that?
On collectivism, I think Dinesh D'Souza said it best when he said the collectivist sees groups, like whether it's a race of people or even the left sees people by their gender or, some other arbitrary accident of birth. They see that as sort of like a body and human beings as cells within the body. So when you see people as cells and not ends in and of themselves, well, then that's where the genocide and all of the, tyranny laws can be justified, because it's like you killing cells within your body to kill a cancer so you could save yourself. And that's where the tyranny of collectivism is justified. That's how you get from step 1, people are just parts of a group, a concept, and then I'm protecting the concept. So even if I kill 1, 2, or 10,000, how can people say, something like, I'm a Marxist or I'm a National Socialist after all the crimes of Marxism? They just don't have this accountability. They go, well, it's not people that should be accountable. I'm not responsible for any of my things. It's more the group and the race, as, of course, you always hear about. How would you, how would you communicate to someone who just sees the world through a collective lens? Do you have any good one-liners or anything that you've thought that could either just plant the seed or maybe get them second guessing, seeing the world through a collectivist lens?
I would just say, a lot of people will say, I call myself an anti-feminist, and feminists cannot stand that whatsoever. And I would just say to someone that, let's say someone else is, if I'm talking to someone that is a feminist and they hate me, I get a lot of hate, especially on TikTok, for being an anti-feminist. Well, just because we share the same gender, does that mean we have all the same interests and we think the same way? Clearly not. That's your problem with me. So why are you so obsessed with this group identity as being a woman? We clearly don't have anything in common. I have way more in common with you than a feminist, but we share the same gender. So clearly that does not matter, right? That's not how we should be grouping ourselves. I'd much rather group with people based on similar interests, similar beliefs, similar principles. So that's how I would quickly say it. I always try when I'm talking to someone or trying to convince them of something is I try to frame it in a way that makes sense to them. Most people, I feel, won't really understand a situation or won't really get annoyed by something unless it directly affects them. I'm not like that. Something will not affect me whatsoever personally, but just the principle behind it. Let's say I've always been someone that, if you have a friend that's having a problem with someone else, most people would say you should be loyal to your friend and stick up for them no matter what. I will stick up for whatever side I think is correct. I will tell my friend, I think you're being wrong. I don't care that you're my friend. I'm going to stand by my principles. So I always try to relate it to people just so it affects them personally. And that's just something I think is the most effective way, which is this is something my father and I always talk about. It's somewhat unfortunate that most people think so, not not that selfishness is badly, but it's like they don't care if things infringe on other people, but the second it does on them, that's when they finally can see it. And I just don't think that way. But I always say to people, just frame it to how it affects that specific person, because guess what? We are all individuals. So always frame it that way.
Good call. Good call. One of the ones that really stuck out for me was Planning for Freedom, page 44. If one rejects laissez-faire on account of man's fallibility and moral weakness, one must for the same reason also reject every kind of government action. So you'll often get, well, we need the government to step in places A, B, C, and D because, people are bad and people are greedy. The immediate question is, what species do you want running the government? So you don't trust me, let's just say the average person. You don't trust them to be free and engage voluntarily, but you trust that person to vote for politicians who are also greedy and self-interested, at least in a free market. So if we have greedy people, no matter which system you have, fascism, syndicalism, libertarianism, conservatism, if people are bad, well, wouldn't you want a free market system where you could opt out of funding bad people and disassociating with bad actors? So people will often say, I don't trust people, therefore I trust the government. Well, that was refuted, 60 years ago by an Austrian immigrant economist. Any tips you have for dealing with people who say, I'm a realist, I don't trust people, therefore we need the mass kidnapping, theft-funded government running everything?
Well, I think I heard Michael Malice actually talk about this one time, and it might have been actually on one of the Lex Friedman podcasts he's done. And it was something they were talking about a mall company, but just using that as an example. Would you rather have an evil person running a mall company or a company or like Whole Foods, like whatever, or the government? Obviously, we all would rather have an evil person running the corporation or a company because we can opt out of associating with them. We don't have to spend money there. We don't have to interact with them. We can voluntarily choose to opt out and go somewhere else and take our money and business somewhere else. You can't really do that with the government. So how do you really make the argument that you'd rather have government officials ruling over us?
Exactly. Exactly. And Trump is the perfect example. It's like, according to your worldview, we should have been terrified of Trump when he was in the predatory, profit-seeking private sector. But then he was a president and we didn't have to worry because now he works for us, right? No, the opposite's true, just like everything else in their worldview.
Wow, I've never thought about it that way. That's such a good example.
Trump is the perfect example. And even like, there's a debate whether Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Vanderbilt were evil people. But in order to make money in the free market, you have to meet consumer demand. So it turns evil people and channels their greed into something good because it's about, selling to the masses. So,
right.
Yeah, Malice is great.
Yeah, I know. But the free market really does solve all the problems, right? Because and a lot of people will say, oh, well, like the cake bakery Supreme Court decision, like case a couple years ago, and well, actually way long ago during Obama, right? That was a pretty long time ago. People were like, "Oh, you think that you're just homophobic and you're terrible if you think that the bakery should be able to choose not to serve a wedding cake to this gay couple, even though the gay couple was literally seeking out bakeries that would actually deny them. And the bakery actually said, you can buy any other cake, we just don't want to bake you a specific cake for your wedding." And guess what? I think that businesses should be able to turn down anyone they want, even if it's a racist, whatever. And you want to know what solves that? It's people getting mad and protesting, especially in the age of social media. You don't think that if some company turns down, a Jewish person from buying their products, don't you think that the free market and people would freak out? Not to mention, why would I want to give my money and my business to a company that hates me?
Exactly.
Support them. It just makes no sense whatsoever. I don't know.
Second quote you have from the quotable Mises.
Okay. So if history could teach us anything, and this is from, I don't even know how to say this word, Omnipotent Government, page 58. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Yeah, I think it's omnipotent, as though like an omnipotent deity or something.
I don't even know what that word means, so that's great. But I'll learn it. If history could teach us anything, it would be that private property is inextricably linked with civilization, which I think is so true. And this is something that really bothers me about even conservatives will come after libertarians about this. And, the left libertarians will come after, more, Mises Institute type libertarians. And they'll say, all you care about is private property, which means you only care about money and you're just so greedy. And no, the whole principle about private property is like, thou should not steal. You should not be able to steal other people's property. It's not just about money. It's about this person worked or did something to, obtain this property, and you can't just steal it. You can't just initiate force and take from others. That's obviously immoral. And also, if we as private citizens should not be able to do this, how come the government is allowed to do this? Why is that moral?
Of course. Yeah. See, when, gosh, I wish I had that Thomas Sowell quote, but it's something to the extent of, so we're greedy when we want interactions to be voluntary and people to keep the fruits of whatever transactions they have. But it's not greedy if we want one group of people to steal trillions every single year and fund things people don't want to chip into. How is that? That is the greediest thing I could possibly think of. Like, it's greedy for me to offer you a car or a house or a job, but it's not greedy for me to just take the money you otherwise would have been able to opt out of giving me. It's completely backwards.
Right. And this is something like I always say to people, like I've always been a libertarian, but it's just little basic things. Like it doesn't even need to be, you don't even need to read, complex libertarian theory at all. You can just, it's basic everyday situations. I remember in high school, I would have friends at lunch that would always say, excuse the cars outside. I would always have friends at high school in my lunch say, oh, can I have this part of your lunch? Whatever. Can I have some? And I'd be like, no, I brought this for me. And then they would always say, oh, stop being so selfish, stop being so crazy, like, let me just have it. And I just don't understand how I'm selfish for wanting to eat my own lunch that I brought for me. I never ask for other people's food. I always just have what I need. I know what I need, and that's it. I would never try to take from someone else unless they offered, but I've always never been someone that wants to share other people's food. But that stuff always bothered me, and that stuff comes up all the time. I remember my friends always want to use my makeup or wear my clothes and whatever, and it's like, okay, so I bought this, so now you get to enjoy it. And I'm selfish for wanting, like, I'm the selfish, greedy person for not wanting to share the stuff that I bought. It makes no sense. It's so backwards.
Ridiculous. Mine is from The Theory of Money and Credit, page 23. No very deep knowledge of economics is usually needed for grasping the immediate effects of a measure, but the task of economics is to foretell the remoter effects, and so to allow us to avoid such acts as attempted to remedy a present ill by sowing the seeds of a much greater ill for the future. Best example of this is take the minimum wage. So people will say the minimum wage, so we're going to have like debates, then they'll have a law, and then they'll pass it, and then wages will rise. Well, not necessarily. Some people don't have enough skills to be worth that much, so they'll get replaced by robots. They wouldn't have gotten the job in the first place, and they won't get their foot in the door. So your first job is very important. So what else does this do by raising the cost of, just like how they say, well, if you raise the cost of voting by needing a license, so many people won't be able to vote. Okay, well, what do you think it does when you need 50,000 licenses to run a freaking bakery, which you could just do out of your house, but OSHA won't let you. So yes, then they're raising the cost of doing business. So that means that there's fewer businesses. That means there's lower supply, which means higher prices, which means fewer people can afford them, and poor people get hurt disproportionately. I guess I got to throw that in there every time I'm trying to convince someone of something, that it disproportionately affects one group or another. And so it's not just the immediate effects, it's the longer term and the secondary and tertiary effects that make economics interesting. Whereas Paul Krugman says economics is GDP and the unemployment rate. Such an elementary, ridiculous understanding. So yeah, that is, did you pick up any good economic insights overall in this?
Well, I definitely agree with the whole minimum wage argument and I'm not even someone that's like, I'm no AOC who got her economics degree at BU. I'm not an economics, expert like her, but something as simple as minimum wage law. I actually, a couple months ago, read Race and Economics by Walter Williams, who's RIP, great thinker, and one of the few good professors, he passed on since, but, even at the time, there's like barely any. But it's so simple because in people who are pro minimum wage law, like, increasing the minimum wage or even having any minimum wage whatsoever, what they don't realize is it actually ends up hurting the very people that they intend to help. So if you, by raising the minimum wage law, like let's say to $15, it's now the people that are, low income people with no experience, people in high school or like younger people that just need to get their foot in the door, like you said. And then also it happens to disproportionately affect minorities as well. So you think that this is going to be helping the people that need more money, but realistically you're raising the standards for what these companies want to, like the need that they need, or the standards that they need to hire someone, because is this person's labor worth $15 an hour? No, they don't have any experience. It doesn't make any sense. So now you're just making it harder for people that are the most poor and the most, ones that need these jobs to actually obtain these jobs. And it's not that these companies just magically give more money to their employees. They just cut how many people they're hiring.
Exactly. And like if increasing the price of something didn't affect, how much you purchase something, in this case, employment, well, then they don't need to complain about the high cost of healthcare, because that just stimulates the economy. That just gives more money and keeps things flowing. So actually, high prices are a good thing. When, of course, you can see that they hurt the very people they're trying to help. What is your third quote from the quotable Mises?
Okay, so this comes from Theory and History, page 61. And a lot of it is about collectivism. I'm so fascinated by the term. But collectivism is a doctrine of war, intolerance, and persecution. If any of the collectivist creeds should succeed in its endeavors, all people but the great dictator would be deprived of their essential human quality. They would become more soulless pawns in the hands of a monster, which it just makes so much sense, because it kind of motivates people into this emotional reaction to feel like they owe, that they're a collective group, this, allegiance. And even when you get after 9/11, so many people in America were so motivated to be for their country and like against the enemies. People were happy to send their sons to go fight in the war. They felt like it was their moral duty as a patriot, as a citizen. So it really just, this collectivism really motivates people to do horrible things for themselves, to other people. And it really just empowers the dictator, because it gets this dictator to have such an emotional, terrible control over this big collective group of people, where people now are fine to your individual life doesn't matter, because it's for the common good, the collective. And whenever you hear anyone, especially politicians, say it's for the common good, run, seriously, because it's only for the common good to maintain their own power. It's not for the common good of the people. And what does the common good mean, right? Let's define the common good.
Yeah, exactly. I love the voluntary associations that come up in the absence of coercive collectivism, how people will voluntarily start book clubs, mutual aid societies, churches, these things that really give our lives meaning, that bring families into the world, and, give people a sense of their existence is going to continue in future generations. So they behave better in the present, knowing that there's a longer term effect. But when you get people in this coercive collectivist mentality, it's like, just as separation of church and state stopped the religious wars, because it's not like, well, you want to be a Protestant and I want to be a Catholic, so if you win, well, then I got to succumb to you, and then you control the state, so I got to win now. So instead of people cooperating, they were constantly screwing each other over through the state. All we need virtually is separation of economy and state to end the vast majority of other wars. So we just have to take that and apply it consistently. Collectivism is so dangerous, and that's why coercive collectivism, rather, I should say.
Right. Coercive collectivism, right. That's a good distinction. But yeah, I totally agree. I think it was Ron Paul, but I think I heard it from him first, that, just like we have a separation of church and state, we need a separation of the church and the economy, and really every other facet of life. But I never really thought of it that way until he articulated that. And I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. It just makes so much sense to me. As it's simple. You don't need to understand some deep philosophical libertarian theory. It's just common sense things that when you're a kid, I think I've heard, Dave Smith talk about this, but when you're a kid, your parents teach you, don't take from others, don't hit other people, just these basic things that we know are inherently good and moral. But yet, as soon as we get older, and especially like the more leftist collectivist mentalities, is they try to make everything more complex. And I think that the more complex something is, that the more intelligent and intellectual it is. And these little can't even say that word. These Neanderthals cannot understand this. They're just so stupid. They love to like talk crap about people in the South as if they're so stupid. Wasn't it Don Lemon? I always say Don Lemon because I think that's how Larry Elder calls him, and it just sticks in my head. But him with two other people laughing about how we're the elites and like laughing about it, which is so disgusting. But yeah, they just think that the more complex an issue is, that means it's better because it just so you have to be smart to understand it. Whereas I think and things that are common sense that don't need such a big explanation are way more smart and just make sense. And something Clarence Thomas said that what he likes to do is he thinks his duty as a Supreme Court justice is to really convey why he made his decision in his either the decision or his dissents and for Supreme Court cases. And he goes, I try to make it as clear and concise and in simple language so that everyone can read it and understand it. Because he's like, it's not, and he's kind of like criticizing the elitists and a lot of especially lawyers like to go off, and legal theorists and all the legal experts, they love to go off on all these tangents and make it so complicated with legal theory that no one can understand. And he says it's not good to put a $1 idea into a $10 sentence. What's impressive is putting a $10 idea into a $1 sentence. I was like, I completely love that entire concept. He also did say, I don't know if you watched his documentary, I think it was like a year or two ago, and it was Created Equal, Clarence Thomas in his own words, and he talks a lot about his childhood. And his grandfather who raised him was illiterate, but his grandfather would always say, or I don't know if his grandfather said this, or Clarence said it, but he said that his grandfather only knew how to do things right because he wasn't corrupted by reading theory. So he only knew what was right because he wasn't corrupted by reading abstract theories, and it was like a blessing. So he had to just do things with his hands. He only knew what worked because that's what worked. Which I love that idea.
Excellent pick, yeah. The anti-capitalist mentality, page 49. Capitalism is essentially a system of mass production for the satisfaction of the needs of the masses. It pours a horn of plenty upon the common man. It has raised the average standard of living to a height never dreamed of in earlier ages. It has made accessible to millions of people enjoyments which a few generations ago were only within reach of a small elite. I just love that one because it shows you that you don't need politicians in order to, achieve things that you want in life. Like most of the things we want, we can. I don't know if I love the idea of voting with your dollars, but it's not like, well, I don't have a politician there, so basically no one in society represents me. Well, no, where you spend your time, whether it's 1 second or 5 minutes or 50 hours, that's you voting on how to spend your time, and you vote with your dollars. Any scarce resources you employ in any direction, you have a method of doing that in a free market much more effectively than government, simply because you can't opt out of spending time with government or opt out of funding them.
Right. It's like no one likes to go to the DMV. Everyone hates going there, and it's because you have no other options, right? You have to go there to deal with anything to do with driving, versus if you want to, you can choose what doctor you want to go to. You can choose which grocery store you want to go to. You're choosing that you want to associate with them and spend your time there, pay them, versus, oh my God, I have to go to the DMV. This is so annoying. I don't have any other option. And guess what? The DMV has no incentive to improve their standards of customer service because their customer can't go anywhere else. There's no competition. So where's the incentive to actually improve their own service?
Exactly. Government is the monopoly. Government is constantly warning us about might exist if they weren't there, creating monopolies with high burdens of regulation that only allow oligopolies to exist.
Right.
It's unbelievable. What is your next quote from the quotable Mises?
Okay, so this is also from the omnipotent. Great, the word I can't say. Omnipotent government. Can you say that again?
Omnipotent. Yeah.
Omnipotent. Okay. Government, page 52. It's very short, but simple. There can be no freedom in art and literature where the government determines who shall create them. This is like something that I really relate to public education. I think public education is inherently immoral. What do you think the government, why would a government run school, teach its kids, its citizens, bad things about the government, right? It just makes no sense. Like, why would you, it's not like you're going to go, if you're talking to someone as a person, you're going to maybe tell them good things about you. You're not going to tell them all the flaws about you. That's just obvious common sense. So why would you think that the government, I can't believe people are so naive to think that the government actually has an interest in educating its youth. It really has an interest in creating good citizens that will comply with whatever they want. So that is just something that I think makes so much sense. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, that's just history. That is the explicit job of the Prussian education model Horace Mann brought to America. So there's that. But then they'll say, well, that was then and this is now. And even though it hasn't changed, it just needs more funding, basically. So Thomas Woods, I got to steal this one from him, PhD from Columbia University, says, imagine if Walmart controlled all the schools and we would and on the walls, we had pictures of all the Walmart CEOs and there was a rumor the first Walmart CEO, Sam Walton, never told a lie. And, without Walmart, we'd all be lost and no one would really have anything. And we sort of have to pledge our allegiance to Walmart. And if we don't, obey Walmart laws, we go to Walmart jail and Walmart employees shoot us if we resist going to Walmart jail. But other than that, there's nothing wrong with Walmart controlling the education system. Well, you immediately see that. Oh, did I skip over? You have to fund the Walmart education system or you go into the Walmart jail. Oh, okay. And your kids have to go unless they've gotten a Walmart license. You get that if we took this principle and applied it to any other organization, we'd see, all right, they're just pushing their agenda and trying to increase control, which is fine. I mean, I don't have a problem with Catholic churches having schools and everything, but just let me opt out and don't be caging parents. I'm sorry, let me put that differently. Don't be separating parents from children, tearing apart families just because they don't want to go to your indoctrination nonsense bullshit for 6 hours a day, 5 days a week to talk about Pythagoras.
Oh, I love your choice of words there, separating kids from their families. But yeah, I remember hearing Tom Woods say that. I was like, wow, that makes so much sense. And that's exactly what I was saying earlier, is you need to frame situations and things that specific individual can understand. So you need to use the Walmart example for them to grasp their head around the concept. For some reason, people are unable to just do this on their own, but that's the best way to, because then people are like, wait, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Why would I would not? And I think that's what I remember when I first heard him say that. I was like, yeah, it is kind of creepy that I used to be someone stand for the anthem, whatever. But it is kind of creepy, you have to stand up, pledge your allegiance, this. My country's so amazing, and the government's so amazing. They protect us. They're liberating people across the globe, even though because how can you spread liberty by force? That's another question that I just always think of. It's kind of interesting. If no one's asking for it, how can you spread liberty by force? But yeah, no, I think that makes so much sense. And the argument against people, I've made many TikTok videos about abolishing public education, and those always get ratioed. People come after me, whatever. I don't care. You can ratio me. It makes my video go more viral. Do it. I don't care. But they're just like, oh, so you don't want poor kids to get educated. Yep, that's the reason. Yep, definitely has nothing to do with I don't want the government, indoctrinating its youth, forcing everyone to pay for it, and then saying it's a great, amazing thing, and that we should, including the fact that all these standardized test scores just keep going down. The more money you throw at them, it just keeps getting worse and worse, and it's such a waste of money. And I actually went to private school, Catholic school, my whole life, besides for college, and my parents had to pay both into public school and private school. Yes, they did choose to make me go to private school and pay more. They never chose to pay for public school. They just have to.
Exactly. So. Yeah. There really is something about state education that creates such an emotional bond, which you'd have with any group. If everyone had to go to Mormon or Scientology school for 12 years, after 12 years, you have to have some sort of, attachment to this organization or group. It's impossible to not. So when I went to a small meeting here in, I think it was in Scottsdale, Arizona, the teachers were like, Doug Ducey's trying to so you walk in and there's a big cartoon of Doug Ducey, governor of Arizona, who has talked about having vouchers, stabbing the teachers in the back. And it's this big cartoon. And blood is shooting out. I'm like, Jesus, these people are horrible. And I had
union in the back. That's fine. I'm so
yeah. So I had said to the teachers, I said, well, in school, you always said that this is me just getting back at them. This is not a principled approach. I get it, and I'm sorry. I said, Well, you guys always told us you get what you get and you don't throw a fit. Yet, all you guys do is throw fits no matter how much money we give you, and you don't allow people to opt out with the threat of taking their house. My grandmother's on Social Security, which she paid into. So yes, she should get back. But if she doesn't chip in for this nonsense, you think she should get her house taken away. Why do you want my grandmother homeless? I was in a really aggressive mood. Probably not my best moment. Either way.
Sometimes you have to use their logic against them for them to be like,
Yeah.
what, like you just have to, again, frame things for that specific person you're talking to make them understand. That makes a lot of sense. Speaking of Social Security, both of my grandmothers paid into Social Security their whole lives, both died at like 62, didn't get to get any of their Social Security money.
Yeah, the 100% death tax, unfortunately. Absolutely horrible. My next one is from Omnipotent Government, page 53. The salesman thanks the customer for patronizing his shop and asks him to come again. But the socialists say, be grateful to Hitler, render thanks to Stalin, be nice and submissive, then great men will be kind to you later. When was the last time you had a public employee, teacher, officer, member of the DMV, whatever, thank you for being a taxpayer, and then ask you, how can we improve? What do you like? What do you not like? What would it take for you to resist funding us? I mean, there are tax revolts where people choose not to pay because at some point it's just not worth it. They don't seem that concerned. And it reminds me of this Antonin Scalia quote where he says, the transformation of charity into legal entitlement has produced donors without love and recipients without gratitude. So people don't feel, so it makes sense that the teachers aren't like, hey, I just want to take a moment while we're all here to thank you guys for all paying your property taxes. I know it can suck getting that huge bill when, you feel like the average person is an idiot and we haven't done a great job at raising a populace that's brilliant. I want to apologize. I'm passing around a piece of paper. Let me know what I should start teaching in my classroom. That's what we'd have if it were really a public service, but it's not. It's a state trying to control us.
There's no such thing as a public service, honestly. That's a good one. But yeah, no, that makes so much sense because if there's no incentive to like get more money, right? Like, so businesses, or if you're an employee or whatever, if you're a waitress, right? You get more, the better service you give, the more money you make. So you have an incentive to improve. Whereas if you're, a teacher, for public school or a government official, you just have a salary. So you don't, and this is what they do, on the books, right? We're not talking about their speeches and all this other stuff that goes on behind closed doors. They now have more of an incentive to actually try to please their customer or whoever's funding them. But to the people, they just get their set salary. They have no incentive besides, maybe people that are running for House of Representatives, they have to keep going through elections every 2 years. That's like the best incentive that they have. But yeah, public school teachers, they have no incentive to improve. They get tenured and the only positive thing about tenure, though, I will say, is that, that really does help keep someone that's maybe against the liberal indoctrination, a conservative or a libertarian professors, they're able to say what they want. But I mean, there's so little of them anyways, but that's the only good argument for that. But yeah, I mean, there's no incentive to improve the service you give if you don't get any more money or any less, or there's no consequences for you being bad, and there's no rewards for doing better. The incentive structure is just completely destroyed. So why would you want to improve your service? And you're like, when's the last time that you heard a public official ask you how can we improve? And I was thinking, when was the first time? Never heard that before in my life.
Or any politician. You guys are always talking about nonsense. Can I get a thank you for the taxation at the trillions every year? Where's the thank you? I say thank you every time one of my customers and I make some sort of agreement or transaction. Not only do I say thank you, they do too, because it's mutually beneficial. But the government is just so entitled to our money. And of course, if we don't want to chip in, we're selfish, as we talked about at the begining. Right. It's just so exhausting.
You better be happy to give us your tax dollars because it's funding. It's for the common good. It's for the people. It's for the poor. It's for all these great things. And you're welcome for providing you security and safety. Like, we are your parents. You're welcome, and you just need to keep giving to us. And whatever. It's ridiculous.
Providing security. There were 6 months of BLM and Antifa riots. I'm sorry. No. We didn't get apologies then. We didn't get a refund for, all the security we've been paying for. please knock it off with this nonsense.
Disgusting.
What is your final quote from the quotable Mises?
All right, so this comes from Socialism, page 361, and it says that everyone lives and wishes to live primarily for himself, does not disturb social life, but promotes it, for the higher fulfillment of the individual's life is possible only in and through society. So first point, Mises is obviously sexist because he says himself and not, herself and, non-gendered language. So that's terrible. I'm just joking. But it's just, I just always say, like, imagine if everyone just lived for themselves, just, did what they needed to do to provide for themselves, provide for their own families, and the world would be so much better of a place. No one's feeling entitled to other people's work and other people's labor and other people's money to fund their health care. Like, people, like, I always rail against people thinking that having universal health care, which is like impossible, really, that's obviously immoral, because why should someone else get to enjoy the fruits of your labor? That there's nothing moral about that whatsoever. Just because, why should the government be able to steal other people's money and private property and give it to you? Why is that moral? If we as private citizens can't do it, the government should not be able to do it. So yeah, it's all about, like, individual liberty goes hand in hand with personal responsibility. Yes, you have the liberty to do what you want with your money as long as you don't initiate force upon others and you don't infringe on someone else's rights and liberty. But at the same time, if you don't do what you need to do, if you make a mistake, you suffer the consequences. No one else has to pick up the slack, and no one else, one of the biggest problems is when the government helps, like when there's big, like with state bailouts, right? Like, why should this federal government help a state bail out their debt and just go into, why should the federal government, aka the taxpayers of the whole country, have to, pick up the slack and deal with the consequences of that state's problems? So if we all just focused on ourselves, we probably would all be a lot better off. But it's this big entitlement issue that people throughout history just seem to have and suffer from, and it's very frustrating.
Excellent points. My final one is from Human Action, page 117. Competitors aim at excellence and preeminence in accomplishments within a system of mutual cooperation. The function of competition is to assign every member of the social system that position in which he can best serve the whole of society and its members. So first of all, the existence of competition, I don't know if it's inherently good or if it makes, some people do things they otherwise wouldn't, or it, creates more stress in people. All it is a possible mechanism that the free market has that politicians don't. So no matter what it is, I support voluntarily funded competition over a coercively funded monopoly in every sector. So that's important. But then he says, excellence and preeminence in accomplishments within a system of mutual cooperation. So it's not that competition is dog eat dog. It's that, like, Olive Garden and Red Robin compete with each other, and TGI Fridays or whatever, they're competing. But in order to compete, they first have to cooperate with the waiters and the people who make the tables and the people who make the chairs and the people who make the light bulbs. So there's millions of voluntary cooperations, and then there's competition. So it's really competition to cooperate. So far from being dog eat dog and, antagonistic, it's actually a harmonious exchange that's going on, because I can't get $1 out of your pocket unless you voluntarily give it to me in exchange for something you value more than the dollar, or else you wouldn't have made the trade. So that is my final one. Do you have any comments on that, or any final quotes on the book or Mises in general?
Well, I would just say for that last quote that you had, it really just, competition and cooperation is really the only way to create, like, an ordered, civilized society, because no one likes to be forced to do anything. Even if it's like a simple thing, no one wants to be forced to be told what to do. No, like, for me, the second someone tells me I have to do something, I don't want to do it, because it's like, why are you telling me what to do? I'm also someone that I don't want to tell other people what to do. The fact that you don't do something, like, I don't have to tell you to do something. It's the fact that you don't do it makes me not like you. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't have to tell someone to change their behavior. It's the fact that they're doing this in the first place. So there's, like, I've never understood this desire for most people to control how other people live. And that obviously turns other people away. But the sad truth is that most people are okay with being controlled. And I actually tweeted this out the other day because I was just thinking about it. Most people will be fine with having a dictator if it's their preferred dictator, right? So as long as it's their dictator, that is, forcing the whole country or people to do what they want, they're fine with it. But the second it's on from the other side or they don't like them, it's, oh my God, he's a dictator. Most people, it's sad that they would rather have security and safety over freedom and liberty. So that's something that I always think about all the time.